Have you ever pondered why a small Southeast Asian country, Vietnam, could resist and ultimately defeat one of the world's most powerful nations at the time, France? Let's take a journey back to the late 19th century, the era when the embers of resistance first began to glow in Vietnam. Picture a nation, rich in culture and history, gradually falling under the heavy yoke of French colonial rule. The French, in their quest for resources and power, exploited Vietnam, its people, and its wealth. The Vietnamese, however, were not passive spectators. The seeds of resentment were sown, which would, in time, grow into a formidable force of resistance. The roots of this resistance can be traced to the profound sense of nationalism that was beginning to stir among the Vietnamese people. The French had imposed their language, their religion, and their way of life onto the Vietnamese. Yet the Vietnamese clung fiercely to their identity, their traditions, and their values. The very attempts to suppress them only fanned the flames of their nationalistic fervor. Leaders emerged from the shadows, voices that echoed the collective discontent and the yearning for freedom. These leaders, like Phan Dinh Phung and Phan Boi Chau, rallied their compatriots, igniting the spark of resistance. They reminded the Vietnamese of their proud history, their rich culture, and the rights they were being denied. They painted a vision of a future where Vietnam would be free, sovereign, and thriving. Yet the path to freedom was not a straight one. It was fraught with challenges, sacrifices, and setbacks. The French, aware of the growing resistance, clamped down hard. They stifled dissent, imprisoned leaders, and imposed harsher laws. But each action they took, each law they passed, only strengthened the Vietnamese resolve. As the flame of resistance grew, the stage was set for a battle that would forever change the course of Vietnam's history. Now imagine this. It's 1954 and the world watches anxiously as the Vietnamese and French forces clash at Bien Phu. In the heart of the rugged, mountainous terrain of northwestern Vietnam, a battlefield was set. The French, confident in their superior weaponry and seasoned troops, built a series of fortified camps in the valley of Bien Phu, with the belief that their Vietnamese foes could not possibly overcome such formidable defenses. But the French had underestimated their adversary. The Vietnamese, under the brilliant leadership of General Vo Nguyen Giap, had a different plan in mind. They used their intimate knowledge of the landscape to their advantage, transporting heavy artillery pieces through the dense jungle and up the steep hills surrounding the valley. Once in position, these weapons, unseen and unreachable by the French, would prove decisive. The Vietnamese forces, fueled by a fierce desire for independence, worked tirelessly, often by hand, to construct a network of trenches and tunnels. These would allow them to move around the battlefield undetected, to resupply their troops, and to launch surprise attacks. When the battle began in earnest on March 13, 1954, the Vietnamese forces were ready. Their artillery rained down on the French positions with devastating accuracy, while their infantry, moving stealthily through their tunnel network, kept the pressure up with relentless attacks. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the Vietnamese fighters pressed on. Their resilience and determination, born out of years of colonial oppression, were their greatest weapons. For 55 grueling days and nights, they wore down the French forces until finally, on May 7th, the French commander surrendered. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu was not just a military victory for the Vietnamese. It was a triumph of strategic planning, of leadership, and most importantly, of the indomitable will of a people yearning for freedom. The shocking Vietnamese victory at Dien Bien Phu marked the end of French colonial rule and a turning point in Vietnam's struggle for independence. But what happened after the Battle of Dien Bien Phu? Enter the Geneva Accords. In the summer of 1954, representatives from world powers gathered in Geneva, Switzerland. Their mission? To negotiate peace and determine the fate of Vietnam, a nation torn apart by years of conflict. The Geneva Accords are a set of agreements that were meant to bring an end to the First Indochina War, a grueling 7-year conflict between the French Union and the communist-led Viet Minh. The accords were signed by France and the Viet Minh, but notably the United States and the state of Vietnam refused to become signatories. Under these accords, Vietnam was temporarily divided along the 17th parallel, with the Viet Minh in control of the north, and the French and their allies in control of the south. The division was supposed to be temporary, a placeholder until nationwide elections could be held in 2 years' time. However, those elections never took place. The South, with the support of the United States, rejected the idea of nationwide elections, fearing a communist victory. This refusal to hold elections was a direct violation of the Geneva Accords and set the stage for conflict. In the north, the communist leader Ho Chi Minh established the Democratic Republic of Vietnam with the capital at Hanoi. The north was heavily influenced by both the Soviet Union and China, which provided economic and military aid. Meanwhile, in the south, an anti-communist state known as the Republic of Vietnam was established, with its capital at Saigon. The South was supported by the United States and other Western powers, who provided aid and military advisors. The Geneva Accords, while they ended French colonial rule, did not create a unified, peaceful Vietnam. Instead, they established two separate states with vastly different ideologies and set the stage for the Vietnam War. The division of Vietnam was a ticking time bomb, a temporary solution that only served to escalate tensions. The Geneva Accords, while aimed at peace, set the stage for further conflict and the eventual Vietnam War. So, what was the aftermath of this tumultuous period in Vietnam's history? After the dust settled on the battlefield of Bien Phu and the ink dried on the Geneva Accords, Vietnam entered a new era. An era defined by resilience, determination, and an unyielding quest for independence and unity. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu, a victory against the odds, left an indelible mark on the Vietnamese psyche. It was more than just a military victory. It was a testament to the tenacity of the Vietnamese people, a beacon of hope that lit up the path to independence. But the aftermath was not without its trials and tribulations. The Geneva Accords, while ending the French Indochina War, divided Vietnam into two at the 17th parallel: North Vietnam under Ho Chi Minh's communist rule, and South Vietnam under the Western-backed regime. This division set the stage for further conflict, leading to the Vietnam War. Yet, in the face of adversity, Vietnam's spirit remained unbroken. The resilience born out of the resistance against France permeated every facet of Vietnamese society. The struggle for independence didn't end with the French departure. It merely transformed, fueling the continued fight for a united Vietnam. Today, the legacy of this period is woven into the fabric of Vietnam's national identity. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu is more than a chapter in a history book. It's a symbol of the Vietnamese spirit, of their will to fight, to resist, to endure. The Geneva Accords, too, are a reminder of the sacrifices made for the nation's unity. Even now, the echoes of this past reverberate in the heart of Vietnam, influencing its politics, its culture, and its people. They serve as a testament to Vietnam's unwavering pursuit of sovereignty and freedom, a pursuit that continues to define the nation's path. The legacy of this period continues to shape Vietnam's identity and spirit, reminding us of the power of resistance and the pursuit of freedom. So, what have we learned today about Vietnam's resistance against France? Well, we've journeyed through a remarkable period in history, beginning with the early sparks of resistance. As Vietnam was under the yoke of French colonial rule, the Vietnamese people, fueled by a profound desire for freedom and self-determination, began to resist the oppressive regime. This resistance wasn't a mere protest, but a significant, organized movement that marked the beginning of a long and arduous struggle for independence. We then moved on to the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, a pivotal moment that shifted the course of history. This was a David versus Goliath scenario, where the underdog Vietnamese forces, led by General Vo Nguyen Giap, outmaneuvered and overwhelmed the French army. Despite the odds, the Vietnamese forces demonstrated extraordinary courage and tactical brilliance, ultimately achieving a decisive victory that stunned the world. Next, we delved into the Geneva Accords, the international agreement that temporarily divided Vietnam into the communist North and the non-communist South. The Accords represented a diplomatic triumph for Vietnam, as it marked the end of French colonial rule and set the stage for the country's future political trajectory. However, it also sowed the seeds of future conflict, leading to the infamous Vietnam War. Finally, we explored the aftermath and legacy of these events. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu and the Geneva Accords didn't just reshape Vietnam, they had far-reaching implications for global politics, influencing the dynamics of the Cold War and the struggle for decolonization worldwide. To wrap things up, the story of Vietnam's resistance against France is a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. It's a story of resilience, bravery, and the unyielding pursuit of freedom against all odds. It's a reminder that even in the face of immense challenges, people can rise up, resist, and ultimately change the course of history. History reminds us of the power of the human spirit to resist oppression and seek freedom.